I think the difficulty when it comes to culture and changing things is change is hard. It's hard for a lot of people. And even when you are having the best intentions in mind, it is going to be difficult. And so, yeah, if you can lean into that discomfort, if you never come from a place of dogma, then you never have to break that dogma. Is really important. And then just asking, the one simple question that I always ask myself when we're thinking about our yearly focus, when we're doing anything, is what is in the best service of the brand?
Welcome to the Culture Goodr podcast, a behind the shades look at creating and changing culture inside of Goodr sunglasses.
All right, welcome back to the Culture Goodr podcast. It's great to see you again, Stephen.
Oh, it's wonderful to see you, my friend.
All right, well, so today we're going to talk about how to evolve your culture. It seems like you had a pretty good idea of how important culture was right from the jump. What were some of the things that were top of mind for you as you were building Goodr's culture?
What's interesting about it is I had a sense of culture was important and wanted to culture was important, but in full transparency, I kept it Evernote when I worked at corporate America, things that weren't good, that were important, like easy things to grab a hold of, liberal work from home policy, unlimited vacation. But the reality is, I did not start thinking about our culture until 2017 when we had a staff. Mm-hmm. And the first 2 years, all I was thinking about was making product that our customers love and paying our bills.
Yep.
And so I gotta be honest with that. But when there is photographs of our second Goodr stock, which was in early 2018, and me presenting our culture codes, and so as soon as we had a team, I for sure turned and started focusing on that. But that was not the case, and in fact, a lot of businesses, the reality is you got to focus on making product or developing services and selling things and paying your bills before you worry about your culture.
Right. I think the risk there is that becomes the only thing, and then just more people get added on and it never really gets addressed, right?
That's fair. I think that's totally fair. Understanding what type of company you want to start is important. Mm-hmm. And, when we had 7 people and we had our first 800 square foot office, I mean, I thought we made it. I'm like, this is all I ever wanted.
Yeah.
I failed at 5 other companies, and legit at that time, it was a dream. We just kept evolving it. But I do think a lot of entrepreneurs, in full transparency, start a company because they just want to make money and sell it and cash out. Mm-hmm. And that's totally okay. Mm-hmm. That is the culture you're creating.
Right.
And so, yeah, you do run the risk of that. But if this is the company that you want to start and you want to just hire people who care about money or care about nothing, I guess, well, every company has a culture. Absence of a culture is in fact a culture.
That's culture too. Yeah.
Yeah,
sure. So that's an interesting point. So you recognized, all right, we've got people here. How do we want to treat each other? Right. Like, what was that like?
I mean, I'm a big user experience person my entire life. Like whether it's a party or, how do you just make the people around you have a great experience? Mm-hmm. And I think that extended into the workplace. I'm like, all right, well, you're going to spend more time with the people you work with and maybe anybody in your life. So let's make it as enjoyable as possible.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of, that was the root. And, over time, we've evolved our mission statement 3 times. We added our values 3.5 years in. Mm-hmm. And so we've constantly evolved it over time, and we've never felt like we had to, we don't have really dogma here. And I think that's maybe an important piece of the culture of start it when appropriate and, see where it takes you.
Yeah, for sure. Is there a theme to that journey or maybe something that has stood the test of time throughout all those changes?
I mean, I think our 2 core values are fun and authenticity. Mm-hmm. Our first original mission statement is not, I think sometimes when you're starting a company, you can spend so much time on a logo or your name or a mission statement. And what you realize is the brand Goodr, we have spent almost, we're in our 10th year making that name means what it means.
Right.
It was nothing. And so I think people understanding that is not trying to fixate, have an essence of what's going on. I think that when we first started goodr, it was because, we thought running was fun. Your gear should be too. If you heard me talk about at that time, that's what I talked about. You heard we used it in early ad copy. And so that idea of fun has never left. We've evolved it to understand what it means, but oh yeah, man. The idea of fun and making product that is fun and fashionable, that is really stuck with us from the very beginning.
For sure. And I think on the authenticity side, goodr's always had a lot of options, and it's kind of about self-expression more or less, but within the context of at first running, right? And then ultimately just active eyewear. So that piece it's interesting that it's external and internal, but that kind of became our mission statement as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, I first realized this working trade shows in 2016, where I would see people come up, would do the pitch, and they would come into our glass. They'd take the black pair off, Whiskey Shot State, and they put them on, and then they'd immediately put the color they really wanted on, maybe donkey goggles, and they put those on, and then they would smile and I'll take these. So for $25, we gave them permission to be unabashed themselves.
Sure.
And so, yeah, that is like that piece, that authenticity piece has been at our core. And then early on, we hired people. We just celebrated individuals. We just did fun, quirky things and really gave permission to people to be who they are. And so in 2018, it was December. Yeah, we just read their lead, and then we met as a group and created our core values of fun and authenticity. That was 3.5 years after we started. But yeah, we kind of laid those breadcrumbs along the way.
For sure. There's something beautiful about the simplicity of having 2 core values, right? It really clarifies things and gives you a direction to aim in.
Yeah, it does. And from a marketing standpoint, marketing with people and getting people to understand ideas, and it's simpler, right? We've had, at one point we had the 2 core values and a bunch of pillars, and we've used different techniques over time to get people to think about it and understand what this is, but they do always go back to fun and authenticity.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I've noticed is as the team grows, the needs for clarity or the way that we invite people into supporting the culture has changed. Can you talk about some, maybe from those early days, right, where there's just generalists doing a lot of stuff, that there's a flat reporting structure, to then we start to hire specialists, we've got teams. There's growth points along the journey there. So how do you continue to evolve the culture to be relevant at each of those points?
Yeah, I think if you run a company, if you have 10 people, or you lead a team and it's 4 people, or insert where you are, understand that your culture is always evolving. It's never set it and forget it. And, for us, and also I would actually do some work first and foremost in understanding what do you mean by the word culture, because this is a realization we had here. We actually define the word culture at goodr now as the shared behaviors, rituals, game plans, and anchors of our team. We go through and explain every single one of those words: behaviors, rituals, game plans, anchors, team. What do we mean by that?
Yeah.
So I would start at the base level. What do you mean by culture? Because I think sometimes people mistake culture. The joke we talk about is people mistake ping pong table for culture, but actually I think people mistake we have a really fun office. That's part of our culture.
Yeah.
Or people think culture is only the stuff we do for the staff. And it's no. We're a product company. That's part of our culture. We're a marketing company. And so I think at the base level, people need to understand what they mean by culture, period. I'll go on. I'll answer your question, but I wanted to start there.
Yeah, no, that's a great starting point. It's how do people like us do things like this around here, right?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so we've evolved it over time, where little things, like you said, my dream actually from the very beginning was, one of the original things I had was I wanted to run a no bosses. I want a complete flat reporting structure. And we rode that out till we were about 35 people reporting to me, and it just didn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And, I still think that I actually think weirdly it would be easier. I still think it is possible. It's a lot of work And I'll say, so we realized, man, we can't do this. I was spread incredibly thin, and if you have a team of nothing but 100% bona fide rock stars who are experts in their field, great. But that's just not that's not part of my lived reality. And so we moved to there's probably 10 or 11 flocks to start, and so we moved that out, and then as we got bigger, we moved herds. Then we eventually got to like 18 flocks, then 18 people reporting to me. I'm like, well, back to the beginning. So then we created like herd versus departments, and now we have a thing that's a colony. It's actually 2 departments. So now 5 people will report to me. But we did that right. We went from flat to teams in 2019. Went from teams to teams and departments in 2021, and then last year we added we call it a colony, which is basically 2 departments.
Yeah.
And that's just what we needed at the time. I had to let go of my fantasy of flat.
Yeah. Well, I recall you being very into the idea of, if we set a prime directive for everyone and we give them autonomy, they can get there on their own, right? But what you acknowledge is we also need a chain of command, and we need to divvy up responsibilities and give people like a thing that they can call the ball on, right? They're like, hey, we're ops, so you got to listen to us about ops shit, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't get anywhere. So what's cool is we still have that idea of like a prime directive, of a brand focus that everyone can aim at in their own way. And at the same time, we've built in that chain of command where there is, okay, people get to make calls on certain things, and we're just going to support them.
Yeah, and I think that there's a reason a lot of companies have a certain hierarchy structure. You learn that, and I think that also, I don't even. And what's funny right now is I can't even remember why I was actually. I think why I was so attached to being a flat reporting structure is because I do believe in my core, if you have ownership and you people crave autonomy. I crave autonomy for sure. And if you are 100% self-aware and have ownership, that is great. But then you realize you're not getting coaching. I don't. So anyway, I'll go off this topic. But I think the point of this is, man, whatever your culture is, you're going to evolve it, and you're going to change things, and you should change things. If you don't change things, you have that's actually the more concerning thing.
Right, for sure. Is there anything that comes to mind, like a big shift, other than, in having bosses, so to speak, but just like the different growth points? What had to change about our culture in order to preserve it?
Yeah, and if you all listen to this podcast long enough, you've heard me talk about how it is insane to think that you could have the same culture of 50 people versus 60 versus 100 versus 150. It's not possible. You just have to evolve it appropriately. So yeah, so that's one. I mean, I think that oh man, do you have some, Shaun? You probably have some off the top of your head.
I was just thinking, well, you came up with NASA, which was the Insights, Agility, Scalability, Accountability. And that was at a time when we were reaching the limits of scale for certain things, right? So that was a big realization, I think, is that not everything scales. Like you're saying, it seems obvious, but of course not everything scales. Like, you have to evolve it. And so even that was a response to, how do we install a mindset that allows us to scale up better from the beginning, or at least plan to be more agile when those stress points come our way.
Yeah, right. That's for sure one of them. I mean, on that same line, it's smaller, certain things like, I mean, in the world of scale, hiring experts to hone their craft. I mean, a little thing is, I used to do storytelling workshops. That's since been handed off. Like I will eventually, I will be back. I want to do this again. But what you realize is, just me teaching a storytelling workshop does not scale. Now we have a learning development team, and so that's a personal example. I think that we have done. I think how we have approached AMP, which is how we it used to be a quarterly review system. It's now trimesterly review, right? We used to be on the quarter system. We changed to the trimester system.
Yeah.
That's an evolution because we realized, oh man, we have a really strong, we have really strong practices. We don't need to do them every quarter now. We can do them every trimester.
Mm-hmm.
That was a shift. But AMP, we look and we tweak it every single quarter, where now the changes are pretty small that it's actually kind of hard to see. But if you were to look at the original AMP versus the AMP now, it is, they are like, it would, it is, one is an apple and the other is a car. Like, I don't know, like it is not even, they're not even fruits anymore.
Totally right.
And so there's so much like that. We've changed so slowly, we don't even know how much we have changed it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The small things stay in place. Like, it seems dumb, but starting meetings on time and ending them on time. That is a cultural ritual that is just so simple, but it takes a while for people to get it. Like, they're late to a couple meetings and they're like, oh shit, like, you mean like actually on time.
Yeah. That's a good, for sure. That's a great example. That didn't come overnight either, right? We had to work that in.
Mm-hmm.
I think that at one point we allowed remote work options, and for our listeners out there, nobody at goodr currently, there's no full remote work option.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody here, it comes into the building Tuesdays and Thursdays. And that's a shift that we made over time as well. And that just came from a place of it came right after the pandemic, actually, and it came to this place of like, man, being full remote's not good for people. It's not good. And then it's also, there's a weird thing where I started believing is, well, it's also kind of not fair in a sense that certain people get to work remote and others don't.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that we've evolved over time.
Yeah, definitely. So paying attention to those things that work until they don't work, and then once they don't work, going, all right, well, how can we evolve this so that it does?
Yeah, and then they might work again.
Mm-hmm.
That's also true. That's also real.
Yeah, that's funny. Like, at some point later, we'll focus a little bit more on the learning and development's mastery stuff, but we start with one thing, we go to another thing, and kind of maybe come back around to a different version of the thing we started with, right? It's all the cycle.
That's life.
Yeah.
That is life. I think, for us, another big shift we made recently is, so I would say, I'll bring this back to, if you're leading a team or a business, understand, okay, where you start is not where you're going to end up. And so how do you evolve it appropriately? What's the essence of what you're trying to keep?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you can really, like a mission statement doesn't need to come overnight. If you have an essence of it, and then once you get it, I think you do, there's a few things you should kind of work to get and then keep pretty sacred or change with a very, very intentional way. Mm-hmm. I think a mission statement and your values, pretty important. As our ethos, we have our origin. Your origin actually never changes, which is fun. Your mission, values, and vision. But like origin, mission, values, once you kind of have those, if you can, that is the giant container to play in.
Mm-hmm.
And work towards.
Yeah, and the more you can define what the behaviors are that make those values real and the way to participate in upholding the mission, the more likely you are to give people the autonomy to actually pull it off, right?
Yeah, and I think that when, for our listeners out there, and I get this all the time, man, when you interview at goodr, people listen to this podcast a bunch and they'll come in and, oh man, I don't believe that. I can't believe that culture is, that culture stuff real. And the answer is, well, yes, this culture stuff is real. And also, oh man, my point is, yes, this culture stuff is real and we focus heavily on our culture. But one giant shift that we have made in the past year is this idea of culture does not mean what we do internally. It is the total, and really broke it down into the four anchors, which we've done podcasts about, but we're a product company, we're a marketing company, we're an operations company, and we're a people company. Mm-hmm. And that's probably been the biggest shift recently, is actually really identifying that and in kind of coaching people to understand that when you have a culture like us, often people think that you're a personal development company that makes products,
Right.
when in fact we're a product company that cares about personal development.
Mhm.
And so that's been a shift that we needed to make also. So, everything changes.
Yeah, for sure. I'll say one thing that I always teach in onboarding is we're inviting everyone to be a part of this thing that we aspire to uphold. But as
Yeah.
soon as you draw any line and say, this is how we are, you will inevitably step across that line and make yourself a hypocrite, right?
Yes.
But in that moment, if you can say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, and then do something to make amends, you're good. You're doing the thing, because the point is the attempt, right? The point is to have the aspiration, to make the attempt, and then to call yourself out if you blow it. That's all we can do is just put that into practice and do our best to keep it going.
I 100% agree. And I think the difficulty when it comes to culture and changing things is change is hard. It's hard for a lot of people. And even when you are having the best intentions in mind, it is going to be difficult. And so, yeah, if you can lean into that discomfort, if you never come from a place of dogma, then you never have to break that dogma.
Right.
Is really important. And then just asking, the one simple question that I always ask myself when we're thinking about our yearly focus, when we're doing anything, is what is in the best service of the brand?
Mm-hmm.
And at the core, that is what drives when I make major shifts.
Yeah, that's awesome. And also reminding everyone, there is no them at the top that people within are opposed to. There's no us versus them. It's all us, right? So if it doesn't mean something to me, it doesn't mean anything to anyone. So each of us has to care about these things in order to make them real.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. So before we land this plane, how can you wrap up everything that we've talked about today for keeping a good culture in place?
Oh man, right at the very start, understand that your culture is going to evolve constantly, and it should, and you should get excited to evolve it appropriately. Understand just what is your core ethos, get that container, right? Mission, values, and where do you aspire to be? That's just really important. And then at the end of the day, find the people that believe what you believe, and then just go. That's all you really need to do.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you, Stephen. Thanks everyone for listening. Until next time, be excellent to each other.